Good morning. Welcome to this MPC and FSC press conference. My name is Doreen, and I'll be moderating this session. So, Governor, with us we have representatives from both local and regional media houses, and we have an audience that is following us online on our YouTube and Twitter handles. And we also have RBA and IGIHE that is broadcasting this live on their YouTube channels. So, Governor, you'll take us through your presentation in Kinyarwanda, in English, and then you'll summarize it for us in Kinyarwanda for our local audience. So, without wasting much of your time, I'll hand over to you, Governor. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Doreen. Good morning once again, and welcome to our colleagues from the media fraternity. So as said and as usual, we meet you on a quarterly basis to communicate the outcomes of the Monetary Policy Committee and the Financial Stability Committee. So this is the first for this year, 2025, and the meetings were held yesterday. So again, I will use a short presentation to summarize the outcome of the meetings. Let's proceed with the slides. Continue. So on the monetary policy side, we normally start by looking at the performance of the global economy. Again, I won't take much time on this because you've already seen it. These are publications by the IMF. But what we see, global economy remains, let me say, stagnant for 3 consecutive years, and expected to stay the same for the next, this year, next year, 3.3, 3.2. This slow growth, recovering from the challenges we had in the last 4 years, the shock from COVID, shock from the high global inflation, 22, 23. But the good thing to note is that as we move to the next slide, is that inflation is easing across the world based on the monetary policy decisions taken by different central banks, 22, 23, tightening their monetary policy stance, but also the opening up of the global trade routes, logistical routes, that has helped to ease the challenges of the flow of goods across the world. And again, as we said, the shock from the Ukraine-Russia war, countries have found, or the world has found, ways around that. And so all that has worked to ease global inflation to 5.7 last year, expected to be around 4.2 this year, and further down to 3.5 next year. As you remember, it had gone above 8% in 2022. Same with Sub-Saharan Africa, we see eased inflation again, and as all this has impact on our own domestic inflation. So on the domestic front, I'll start with the general performance of the economy. As you had publication by the Institute of Statistics, the first 3 quarters of this year, the economic growth was strong, at an average of 9.2 so far for the first 3 quarters of this year. This was mainly driven by continued growth in services and industry. Industry, mainly construction, manufacturing, but we also see mining picking up. Again, this year, last year we had strong agricultural growth, especially season A. That contributed to the overall higher economic growth we saw in the first 3 quarters. When you look at the composite index, stay on that slide. When you look at the composite index of economic activity that we track as a central bank, it indicates that 4th quarter growth remains strong. This is at 15.7%, the composite index, not the actual growth. The actual growth should be announced by the Institute of Statistics. Normally it happens in March, but we expect this to remain strong, and most likely the original projection of 8.3 growth for 2024 will be exceeded. On the trade or external sector, we see improvement of our numbers in fourth quarter of 2024. Increased export at 15.8%, still growth in imports, though much lower than what we experienced in exports, and this had a positive impact on the trade deficit that was reduced by 3.7% in the fourth quarter. But overall, for the year January-December 2024, growth for exports were at 6.9%, imports at 5.8%. But as we always say, because the base of imports is much bigger, we saw our trade deficit widening by 5.2%. So this had an impact on our exchange market, where we saw the flour depreciating by 9.42 in 2024. This is much lower than the 18.05 we registered in 2023, but still higher than our normal average of around 5%. On the transmission mechanism, we track the movements in interest rates of the interbank market rates and government securities rates, but also the lending and deposit rates. So as we always say, the short-term money market rates always follow our policy decisions. As you can see, the interbank rate reduced to 6.7% on average in quarter 4, compared to 8.27 where it was in quarter 4 of 2023. This was mainly linked to our easing of the monetary policy stance in May and August of last year. We haven't seen much transmission into the lending and the deposit rates, so it takes time. It takes time for these monetary policy decisions to be to influence the longer term interest rates. So more or less remaining the same over the last 1 year compared to the year before. So our main focus is inflation. So 2024 was a good year in terms of inflation. We saw prices or the speed at which prices were increasing really reduced, and inflation stayed in our band from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. As you can see, in fact, from the end of last year of 2023, which it has reduced to 4.1%, and as we had explained in the last MPC sessions, this was mainly driven by good performance of agriculture in season A of 2024, and the normalization of global trade and reduction of global inflation, as well as I had said earlier. So as you can see, at the end of the year, the last quarter of last year, inflation was at 5.2%, slightly higher than the rest of the year, and this was because of unfavorable weather conditions that delayed agricultural produce, but also affected overall agriculture in season A. And we are comparing season A to a season A of 2023 that was bumper harvest. So we wouldn't say that the harvest for season A 2024 was that bad, but when you compare to the bumper harvest we saw in 2023, so the price is slightly moves upwards because of the base effect. And that is explained in the details on the right-hand side of the slide, showing the different categories of our inflation. The big jump, as I said, is in food, mainly because of the base effect, because of very low prices we experienced in end of 2023 and beginning of 2024. So this shows the quarterly movement of inflation to the end of the year. And for January, again, as you see in the publications from the Institute of Statistics, inflation was at 7.4%. Mainly linked to food prices again, the base effect, because the yields for the first quarter of this year was below the yield we received in 2023. So going forward, the The inflation outlook is that for this year, 2025, we project that inflation will remain within our band. But as if you remember, in the last MPC round, we had projected it to be at 5.8%. We have revised that slightly higher to 6.5% based on the numbers we got for the last year and so far where we are by end of Jan and the projections we see ahead. So this is expected to average 6.5% this year and move down 4.1% next year. This is assuming normal agricultural performance for season B 2025 and normal agricultural performance over 2026. So again, as you see, the risk we always highlight is these projections are based on normal weather condition and normal agricultural performance, but also we see geopolitical tensions globally in the region. So this doesn't take into consideration any effect from these tensions we see around. So if we don't expect any of this to materialize to the extent of affecting our inflation projections, but remains a risk that we are monitoring. So with that, the Monetary Policy Committee has decided to maintain the policy rate at 6.5%, though there are slight pressures on inflation, but remains within the band. And we are confident that at this rate, 6.5%, we'll be able to maintain the inflation within the policy band of 2 to 8% over the medium term or over the policy horizon, as we normally say. So that's the summary of the outcome of the discussions we had in the Monetary Policy Committee. On the Financial Stability Committee, we start by looking at the overall deepening of the financial sector. It continues really to deepen. The assets growing by 20.6% to 12.8 trillion. And this translates into 68.5% of our economy. So when you look at that 5-year horizon, we had a blip in 2021 because the economy had really shrunk in 2020 because of COVID. But looking at from 2022, the financial sector vis-a-vis the economy started recovering, and it remains strong. It remains strong in terms of its deepening, but also financing the economy in general. And this is seen across all the subsectors of the financial sector. So the slide here shows the growth of the assets of the banking industry and the microfinance institutions. As we had indicated in the last MPC round, the microfinance institutions registered very high growth last year because of the shift of 3 formerly microfinance banks to the category of microfinance institutions. So that influenced the higher growth of 39.4% of the assets of the subsector that we see here. But generally speaking, it remains positive across all the subsectors. Here we are looking at the intermediation. Both banks and microfinance institutions continue to increase their lending to the private sector, so the outstanding credit to the private sector continue to increase, but also the new loans to the private sector. When we look at last year, growth of 16% from the banking industry, so this is positive. It remains. We'll be looking at the stability numbers, but it's on the growth numbers, on the impact of the financial sector, the banking industry, and microfinance institutions on the performance of the economy, we see it remains positive and strong. So on the stability numbers, here we look at the banking industry. Again, we are used to these measures: the capital adequacy ratio, the liquidity ratio, and the non-performing loans. So they all remain strong above the regulatory requirements. Capital adequacy ratio at 20.5%, and the main factor here is the non-performing loans remaining below 5% for now. I think this is the 3rd year running, and that indicates positive developments in the underwriting practices and risk management of the financial institutions, and gives confidence on any shock or to the stability of the institutions. But still, the good thing is we have a strong capital base. We have enough liquidity for the banks to meet the obligations, whether short-term or long-term, and profitability continues to increase as well. So profitability helps to reinvest these resources into the financing of the economy and strengthening of the financial sector in general. Same with the microfinance institutions. Strong capital base, non-performing loans continues to decline, staying below 5%. Liquidity ratio still very high, and also improving profitability of the microfinance institutions. Insurance sector, so we saw its assets increasing by 18.5%. This is mainly driven by increase in gross premiums and plowed back resources from retained earnings and investment income as well. On the stability side, the insurance sector also remains sound. If you move to the next slide, please. Yeah, so here we show the solvency ratio that we use to measure the capital base or the capital strength of the insurance sector. This is way high above the minimum requirement, and same with the liquidity, still above the 100% requirement, and also we see profitability increasing in the insurance sector. And on the pension side, now this is a private, yes, on the pension side, whether RSSB, the private pension funds, IGIHE, we also see the assets increasing. We see increasing contributions and increasing investment income that is keeping this pension sector strong and able to serve the needs of their clients. On the payment system developments, maybe just focusing on when we look at the transaction, the volume, whether person to person, person to business, push and pull, they have all been increasing. So we see deepening of digital financial services. And this is seen on the next slide, where we show the percentage of these digital transactions, value of these digital transactions as a percentage of our GDP that has continued to increase every year, increasing from 179% in 2023 to 301% this year. And we, as again I already say, we expect this to even increase faster going forward as we see eCash coming on board. Just summary to show that beyond the normal prudential measures we track, we see emerging challenges, and we always follow this as a regulator to avoid any shock caused by these emerging issues like climate change, cybersecurity. So we continue to track this, whether through supervision, but also regulation and directives we issue to the financial institutions. So in summary, we said we see the sector really strong and stable, and we expect this to be maintained over the medium term. Again, as a central bank, as a regulator, we continue monitoring all the developments to take any necessary action if there is need to avoid any instability within our financial sector. So briefly, that's what we had from the two committee meetings. As requested, let me try to summarize that in Kinyarwanda. So let's continue to the slides. So murakoze cyane, nk'uko bisanzwe buri gihembwe akanama ka politiki y'ifaranga n'akanama gashinzwe kutajegajega ku rwego rw'imari turaterana. So ni umwanya tuba twaboneyeho gutangaza ibyavuye muri izi nama zombi. Duhereye ku bya politiki y'ifaranga, dutangira tureba ku rwego rw'isi uko ubukungu buhagaze. Ubukungu ku rwego rw'isi bwatangiye kuzaho ukurikije ibibazo twari twagize mu gihe cya covid, ariko bwakomeje buri hasi gato y'uko byari bimeze mbere ya covid, nubwo tubona icyizere y'uko mu gihe kiri imbere bizakomeza gutera imbere neza. Ariko twebwe ko dukurikiranira hafi nka Banki Nkuru y'Igihugu ni ku bigendanye n'umuvuduko ku biciro ku masoko ku rwego rw'isi byasubiye hasi cyane kubera ingamba zafashwe n'amabanki y'ibihugu ku rwego rw'isi yazamuye urwunguko rwabo, ariko no kuba imiyoboro y'ubuhahirane yaragiye ifunguka nyuma y'ibibazo twari twagize muri covid byashoboye koroshya urujya n'uruza rw'ibicuruzwa, bigabanya ikibazo cyateraga ku bicuruzwa. Ibyo byose byatumye umuvuduko w'ibiciro ku rwego rw'isi umanuka ukaba ugeze kuri 4.5 mu mwaka ushize, bikaba biteganyijwe ko muri uyu mwaka bishobora kugera kuri 4.2 ndetse bigakomeza bimanuka kuri 3.5. Ibi rero bigira ingaruka nziza ku muvuduko w'ibiciro ku masoko yacu, kuko ikibazo twaterwaga n'ibituruka hanze ubwo kiba cyagiye kigabanuka. Ikindi ni uko mu rwego rw'ubukungu nyirizina muri rusange ubukungu bw'igihugu cyacu bukomeje guhagarara neza, nk'uko ikigo cy'ibarurishamibare cyari cyabitangaje mu bihembwe bitatu bishize. Twagize umuvuduko mwiza ku mpuzandengo y'ibyo bihembwe bitatu ni kuri 9.2%. Iyo dukurebye imibare dukurikirana twebwe nka Banki Nkuru y'Igihugu mu gihembwe cya 4 naho tubona ubukungu bwarateye imbere neza, nubwo imibare ya nyuma izatangwa n'ikigo cy'ibarurishamibare nanone, ariko ntitwatinya kuvuga yuko ubukungu buzatera imbere kurusha uko byari byitezwe by'8.3% mu mwaka ushize. Tureba nanone ubuhahirane bwacu n'amahanga, cyane cyane dukurikirana uko icyuho hagati y'ibyo twohereza amahanga n'ibyo dukura amahanga bimeze. Mu gihembwe cya 4 iki cyuho cyaragabanutse kubera ko ibyo twohereza amahanga byarazamutse cyane kurusha ibyo dukurayo, 15.8% ugereranyije na 3.3% ku byo dukurayo. Ibyo bituma icyuho kigabanuka 3.7%, nubwo mu mwaka wose ufashe impuzandengo y'umwaka wose icyuho cyazamutseho 5.2%. Bikaba byagize ingaruka ku isoko ry'ivunjisha, aho tubona ifaranga ry'u Rwanda ryateye agaciro 9.42%. Ibi ngibi ugereranyije n'umwaka wa 2023 byari byateye agaciro cyane kuri 18.05%. Ikiza nuko tubona ibibazo twari twatewe n'amapfa ya 2022-2023 bigatuma ibiribwa tumiza amahanga bizamuka. Umwaka ushize byaragabanutse ibyo bibazo, ndetse tubona yuko no muri uyu mwaka ikibazo cyo guta agaciro ku faranga kizakomeza kugenda cyoroha kugeza mu gihe tubona ko mu myaka nk'itatu iri imbere twasubiye kuri hafi 5% kuri buri mwaka. Tugiye ku muvuduko ku biciro ku masoko, aricyo dukurikiranira hafi nka Banki Nkuru y'Igihugu, twishimiye ko mu mwaka ushize umuvuduko w'ibiciro ku masoko wari mu gipimo kitarenze icyo twifuza ku rwego rw'ubukungu bwacu. Ku mpuzandengo byari 4.8% mu mwaka wose, byazamutseho gato mu gihembwe cya 4 kubera umusaruro watinze kugera ku masoko kubera ibihe bitari byiza by'imvura twagize mu gihembwe cya nyuma cy'umwaka ushize. Ariko icyo tubona ni uko muri rusange umwaka ushize byagenze neza, ndetse n'uyu mwaka iyo turebye uyu mwaka kuri umuvuduko w'ibiciro ku masoko ntabwo bizarenga cya gipimo twifuza ko bitarenga cya 2.8%. Ku mpuzandengo tubona umuvuduko ku biciro ku masoko uyu mwaka bizaba ari hafi 6.5%, ndetse bikamanuka kuri 4.1% mu mwaka wa 2026. Ibi ngibi tubivuga dushingiye ku iteganya mibare tubona mu gihe kiri imbere. Twizera yuko ubuhinzi buzagenda neza, nta kibazo tuzagira cy'amapfa. Twizera yuko ibibazo tubona mu karere no ku rwego rw'isi by'intambara bitazagira ibihe ingaruka zidasanzwe byagera ku bukungu bwacu. So twiteze rero ko nta kibazo gihari mu muvuduko w'ibiciro ku masoko muri uyu mwaka no mu mwaka utaha. kubera iyo mpamvu twasanze nta mpamvu yo guhindura urwunguko rwa banki nkuru y'igihugu kuko uko rungana 6.5% biradufasha kuguma muri cya cyiciro cya hagati ya 2 n'8% ku muvuduko w'ibiciro ku masoko. Mu icamake n'ibyo navuga byavuye mu kanama ka politiki y'ifaranga, ku kanama ka kurikirana kutajagajega rw'urwego rw'imari. Icyo tubona nuko twishimira ko urwego rw'imari muri rusange rukomeza gutera imbere. Umutungo w'urwego rw'imari wazamutsemo 20.6%, kandi iyo mvuze gutera imbere ntabwo ari twishimira ko ari amabanki ari ibigo by'ubwishingizi gusa byateye imbere, nuko biba bifite ingaruka nziza ku mikorere y'ubukungu muri rusange. Kwirebye mu myenda amabanki na ibigo by'imari iciriritse bitanga nabo byariyongereye cyane. Ubwishingizi ibigo by'ubwishingizi biha ababigana nabyo byarazamutse. Ikindi dukurikirana ni hari ibipimo dukurikirana kureba imari shingiro y'ibigo by'imari hagazite, amafaranga bakoresha abakiriya babo bakenera aho bashakiye hose arangana te, urwunguko rwabo rurangana rute, ubwiza bw'inguzanyo zitangwa burangana gute. Ibyo byose imibare yose iratwereka ko biri hejuru cyane y'ibipimo ntarengwa tuba twatanze. Bikaba rero biduha icyizere yuko urwego rw'imari ruhagaze neza uyu munsi ndetse no mu gihe myaka mike iri imbere. Murakoze cyane.
Murakoze, Governor. We are going to open up for the questions, and we request each media house will take on 2 questions just to allow everyone to ask their questions. Thank you. Let's do Bloomberg and then RBA.
Hello, Governor. How are you doing? My name is Andira Oganga. I'm with Bloomberg News. I have 2 questions. The first one is, what is your projection for 2025 in terms of growth? You said that 2024 is expected to exceed the expectations that you had. So going into 2025, what numbers are you looking at and what indicators will inform that number? And to my second question, a couple of weeks back, I was talking to the CEO of the Rwanda Stock Exchange, Celestine, and he said he's in conversations, or rather the Rwanda Stock Exchange is in conversation with the central bank to introduce hard currency bonds or facilities that can be listed, and he said the ball is now in the central bank's court. I'm very interested to find out hard currency investment options portfolios, dollar-based investment options, and he said he's having conversations with the central bank, but the ball is in the central bank's court. So I'm curious to find out, how are those conversations going from your end? What are some of the concerns that you have, and how soon can we expect it? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I think I've been talking for long, so I'll now invite my colleagues to chip in. So Thierry can answer the question on the projected growth for 2025, and Biggie, if you don't mind, you can answer the question on the stock exchange. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So, regarding economic growth, what we saw in the year 2024, as the governor mentioned, is that the projection was done in November with 8.3%, but the numbers that we are seeing now are showing that we're likely to exceed that, and it's going to be higher than that. For the medium term, from 2025 going forwards, the projection was around 7%. Actually, it's 7% in 2025 and 7% in 2026. But this, again, was based on this information we had the time in November. Right now, we are in the process of revision of this growth together with the Ministry of Finance. So when the numbers of the final numbers of 2024 will be communicated by the National Institute of Statistics in the month of March, we'll again convene to try to put these numbers together and revise the projections going forward.
Thank you, Governor. On the discussions or assessment being done on the possibility of issuing USD-denominated domestic bonds, is something we're looking at, but in the lens of what would be the risks on one, the risk of the FX risk, because what would happen is a corporate would raise funds in US dollars, having domestic revenues in Rwandan franc, and then at maturity, would they always be able to repay back? Second is to look also, because these bonds would mainly be for offshore investors, and these investors, when they see opportunities in other markets, they tend to sort of leave your own market. So that capital flight risk is something also that we're looking at carefully. So we're hoping that by the end of this financial year, our assessment on all the risk and how to mitigate them will be completed, and further announcement will be made through the stock exchange. Thank you.
Murakoze cyane nyakubahwa gavana. Nitwa Placide Nyinshuti nkorera RBA. Mfite ikibazo kirebana na geopolitique muri aka karere, kuko biragaragara ko ibipimo byanyu bigaragaza ko izamuka ry'ibiciro muri uyu mwaka bizaba biri kuri 6.5%, ariko mu gihe mu mwaka ushize byari kuri 5.2%, ndetse no mwaka 4.8%. Yego. Ariko ndifuza kubaza niba nta mpungenge zihari bitewe n'ibibazo bya geopolitique biri muri aka karere cyangwa se umutekano muke mu burasirazuba bwa Kongo bishobora kuba byagira ingaruka ku biciro ku masoko, ndetse ndashaka ko tunabihuza n'ibirebana n'ibivugwa mu binyamakuru mpuzamahanga ko hari ibihano u Rwanda ruri gusabirwa bitewe n'ibibazo biri mu burasirazuba bwa Kongo. Abantu bashaka kumenya niba hari ingaruka zishobora kubaho ku bukungu bw'u Rwanda mu gihe ibyo bihano bishobora kuba byabaho. Murakoze.
Yes, urakoze. Nibyo turabizi ko hari ibibazo mu karere, ariko nyamara icyiza ni uko dukurikije ibyavuye mu nama y'abakuru b'ibihugu bo mu turere twombi tw'igihugu cyacu kirimo, kumvikana ku ngamba zashyirwaho gufatira icyemezo ibibazo biri mu burasirazuba bwa Kongo. Iyo turebye imibare twatanze, nyango twashyizemo icyo twita caveat, bishoboka ko hashobora kugira ingaruka, ariko twizeye yuko dukurikije irimo bikorwa ku rwego rwa diplomasi, ariko ku buyobozi bw'igihugu cyacu, ari abayobozi mu karere, twizeye yuko bitazagera aho ngaho. Ariko ntabwo ari bwo bwa mbere tunyuze muri ibi bintu, so nta mpungenge dufite yuko bizahungabanya ubukungu bwacu ku buryo byabitesha umurongo ku byo tugaragaza hano. Icyiza ni uko ibishobora kuba tuba tuvuga ngo ibi biramutse bigenze bitya byagira ingaruka yihe, twafata ibyemezo bihe. Ntabwo twicaye gusa, turimo turakora isesengura kureba n'iki cyaba cyatera iki, cyagira ingaruka zihe, ibyemezo twafata n'ibihe. Ibyo byose ni turimo turabikora, ariko kugeza ubu twizeye ko nta kibazo kidasanzwe kizaba birenze ibyabaye ubu ngubu.
Murakoze. Nitwa Tuyisenga Adolphe, nanjye ni umunyamakuru muri RBA. Nashaka kubabaza nyakubahwa gavana, murahuza mute politiki y'ifaranga, yaba iyi mwagumishije kuri 6, urwunguko mwagumishije kuri 6.5%, na gahunda y'imisoro ivuguruye yaherutse gutangazwa na Rwanda Revenue Authority, kubera ko abasesenguzi n'abahanga mu by'ubukungu twaganiriye batubwiye ko kugira ngo imisoro izabashe no kuboneka kandi be efficace ari ukuyihuzwa na politiki y'ifaranga kugira ngo byose bizatanga umusaruro. Murateganya kubihuza mute, yaba ari imisoro izaza gushyirwa mu bikorwa vuba muri uyu mwaka w'ingengo y'imari, n'induka izagenda ishyirwa mu bikorwa kugera NST2 irangiye? Ikindi nashaka kubaza, kabone n'ubwo tugifite urugendo runini rwo kugera kuko tuzaba twohereza ibintu byinshi hanze kuruta ibyo tuzana mu gihugu kugira ngo idolari rike kutuvangira mu biciro by'imbere mu gihugu, ariko hari n'ubwo iryo dolari rituvangira kubera ko ryo rihora rizamuka. Nyamara imibare ikakwereka ko ducuruzanya n'Ubushinwa cyane kuruta uko ducuruzanya na Leta Zunze Ubumwe za Amerika. Abajya kurangura mu Bushinwa duherutse kuganira batubwiye ko utajya muri Forex Bureau n'imwe muri Kigali ngo ubonemo amafaranga aranguzwa mu Bushinwa, amafaranga afite rigotenda mu Bushinwa mayuan. Aho ngaho muhatekereza iki? Muraza no kutubwira ku rwego rwa pension uko rusigaye ruhagaze nyuma yuko habayeho kurwongerera imbaraga binyuze ku rwa za pension, uko rusigaye ruhagaze nyuma yuko murakoze. bashaka kumenya uko improvement yabayeho nyuma y'uko habayeho ko hagiyemo andi mafaranga akatwa ku bakozi n'ubundi.
Okay. Ikibazo ku by'imisoro ngira ngo ba minisitiri babishinzwe barabisobanuye mu minsi ibiri ishize bagaragaza uko bimeze. Ngira ngo mu bisobanuro minisitiri Yusufu yatanze nuko byose byararebwe, haramutse hagize ikibazo cyaterwa n'umusoro runaka kititezwe, leta yafata izindi ngamba, cyane cyane byari bigendanye ku kibazo cy'umusoro ku bikomoka kuri peteroli, kuko hari ubwo bizamuka ku rwego mpuzamahanga bigatera ikibazo. Ibyo buri gihe leta ihita itanga inyoroshyo bigatuma cya kibazo cyabaye ku rwego mpuzamahanga kidasunikirwa umuguzi cyose. Ariko mu gukora biriya misoro twarakoranye natwe nka Central Bank, twese dushinzwe kujera ubukungu bw'igihugu cyacu. So nta misoro twabonye minini yatera ingaruka nini ku biciro ku bigo byahindura projection, cyane cyane nk'igiye kujyaho muri uyu mwaka ntayo twabonye yatera ibibazo bituma habaho umuvuduko w'ibiciro kuva muri iyi bandi yacu ya 2.8%. So ibyo byose twabishyize mu mibare yacu mbere yuko ibyemezo bifatwa, twari twakoranye na Ministry of Finance. So nta mpungenge dufite. Ni nayo mpamvu iyo urebye ukuntu leta yabitanze nawe biragenda biza mu byiciro, ntabwo bafashe byose ngo babishyire hamwe bizi icyarimwe. So twumva rero nta kibazo gihari, ariko natwe nk'uko na minisitiri yabivuze, haramutse habaye kidasanzwe mu isesengura mibare twakoze, n'ubundi dufata ibyemezo bihangana n'icyo kibazo cyavutse mu buryo budasanzwe. Ariko nakubwira yuko twakoranye nabo mbere yuko imisoro ijya itangazwa, twese turafatanya mu kujera ubukungu. Ikibazo cyo guhahirana n'Ubushinwa, ikibazo si uko nta mafaranga y'Abashinwa ari hano, ikibazo ni uko Abashinwa batanga fagitire mu madolari. Ibyo ngibyo twebwe hano muri Central Bank mu myaka ishize nk'itanu itandatu twari twatangiye kugira ishoramari mafaranga y'Abashinwa, ariko kubera yuko akenshi abacuruzi babo nabo bashaka gucuruza amadolari, nubwo byitwa ngo nibo banini ku rwego rw'isi, ariko fagitire zabo hafi hose ku rwego rw'isi bishyurwa mu madovize. Ubundi ari mu Bashinwa, ari muri Dubai, twakabaye dufite amadiramu, ariko abenshi ku rwego mpuzamahanga bisa naho idolari ryatsinze, bose bakora amadolari. So ibyo ngibyo wenda ntabwo kuba ibyo tushoboye kubikora byatworohereza, ngira ngo ariko ikibazo kirenze kuba utabona amayuwani hano muri forex bureau zacu. Ikibazo ni uko niyo uri umunyamahanga ugiye kugura ibintu muri China, fagitire baguha amadovize, bigatuma abantu bose bakomeza bakoresha amadovize. Bigiye bihinduka agakenerwa, byakoroha kuyabona hano ku isoko ry'ivunjisha. So ikibazo rero tureba ni muri rusange ifaranga ryacu ko rihagaze ku rwego ku mafaranga mpuzamahanga. Politiki yo kongera ibyo twohereza amahanga niyo yadufasha kurusha kwizigamira ifaranga runaka ryavuka ukundi. So ku kibazo cya pansiyo niyo bigitangira, nta kintu kiragaragara kidasanzwe. Turi mu kwezi kwa mbere nibwo byagomba gutangira, so nta mibare dufite twabaho ubu ngubu bigaragaza ngo ngiye ingaruka byagize n'iyi haracyari kare cyane.
Yes, then Radio 10.
Thank you. I'm a journalist for the New Times. So I would like to ask about the new regulations. There are two regulations that were issued by the Central Bank on February 5 this year. One is about bouncing checks, and the other one is about risk-based capital requirements for insurers. So I want to ask for each of the two regulations, what's the main rationale for the new regulation, because they are replacing those of 2018, and what issues are they going to address, and how could they impact Rwanda's financial sector? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll invite Sheila to answer the question on risk-based supervision. But the one on bounce checks, I think we wanted to resolve one big challenge we've been facing. People take checks or give checks to their, let me say, clients. They are presented to the bank, and if there's no money there, immediately they are reported to the CIB. So we found that many people would have addressed that issue if they were informed that there is this issue. So what we introduced is that before a bounce check is sent to CIB, the issuer is informed and is given an opportunity to address that issue immediately. If it's not addressed in 5 days, then it is reported to CIB. So we had many people that had erroneous first challenges with bounce checks, and the regulation is very strong on that. When it is reported to CIB, there's no way you can explain that, no, there was this mistake or that mistake. So we wanted to remove those issues and allow people to address the issue immediately before the check. At least be informed that there's a check here, it's going to CRB, you address it, or we take it to CRB. That was the main objective, because we had seen a lot of unnecessary challenges. Yes, sure.
For the regulation on the risk-based capital, basically we are trying to move away from rule-based capital requirements as a regulator, moving on to requesting insurers to inject capital based on the risk that they underwrite. What this means that instead of setting standard requirements for every insurer, we give them the liberty to choose how much risk they can take in the different businesses that they underwrite. But according to the risks that they choose, then we require that they inject as much capital, one, to ensure sustainability of the business, but also to protect the insured in terms of paying claims. Thank you.
Murakoze nyakubahwa gavana, nitwa Emeline Mbabazi, nkorera Radio TV 10. Ndifuza kubaza ku kibazo kijyanye n'ikoranabuhanga mu mabanki. Abantu muri ino minsi hamaze iminsi hagaragara ikibazo cy'uko umuntu ashaka gukura amafaranga kuri akaunti yiwe ayashyira kuri Momo, bikagorana, akaba yabona message ko amafaranga yavuyeho ariko yareba ntayabone, bikaba byafata 2 hours cyangwa se nabo twavuganye bifata 2 days, cyangwa se umuntu akajya kuri ATM kubikuza amafaranga akabikora akabona ko amafaranga yavuye ariko ntayabone. Ndifuza kubaza icyo kibazo kirazwi cyangwa se ni ikibazo cyahari cy'amabanki amwe namwe cyangwa ni ikibazo kiri rusange hari kiri kubitera? Murakoze.
Christian, you want to answer that question? Yeah. Wakwegera hari microphone.
Murakoze Governor. Icyo kibazo cyarabaye ariko ntabwo kiri general. Ni banki zimwe na zimwe zagiye zigira ibibazo bya push pull, kwakira no kohereza amafaranga. Ubusanzwe push pull iri instant biraba, and then hakaba reconciliation umunsi ukurikiyeho. Banki ebyiri ziri muri process yo kugira ngo babigire instant, rero bigatuma habaho ubutinde, tukagira ngo tubahumurize ko kitari ikibazo rusange, kandi turimo turabikurikiranaho aho byabaye bya affecting the push pull na ATM, ariko ubu ngubu byarakemutse. Murakoze.
CNBC.
Thank you so much, Governor. My name is Abi Agina from CNBC Africa. Just 2 quick questions. We did see your neighboring country, Uganda, also maintaining the rate. But my question is in regards to looking at the region and your decision that you've made known today in terms of retaining the rate at 6.5%.
are we likely to see this as you taking a stance that will define the coming cycles going forward? And my second question is sort of not related to the MPC today, but by the visit by the IMF MD to Ethiopia. In regards to, Kristalina Georgieva, she did mention that it's going to be sort of a pressing year for African economies, and she still called for fiscal consolidation. Perhaps, does this align with the trajectory that the bank is looking at for Q1 for 2024? Thank you.
Okay, Thierry, you can answer the second question. So the first question, I don't know whether I got you. So it's fine. Uganda, they maintained, but we are not harmonizing our policy decisions. It depends on individual country economic dynamics, and so we take decisions depending on our own analysis and the projections as a forward-looking monetary policy stance. So what we've decided today, as we say, we are based on the mid-term projections. And that's why we meet every quarter. At times, by the end of one quarter, the projections have changed and might require to take a different decision going forward. So what we have now is based on the numbers and the projections we have. And the region, of course, affects our projections as well. As we saw, we start with global, and the region is part of that. So I won't say that the 6.5 is for the medium term to be retained tomorrow or the other day. It will depend on the analysis we do in the next MPC round. But for now, that's what the projections are showing us.
Yes, thank you. Maybe to bring a bit of context, the advice of the IMF regarding fiscal consolidation in Africa is based on the period of, since the period of COVID, when many African countries, not only African countries actually, most of the countries saw an increase in their debts, and to face with the COVID situation, so debt rising, and some of the countries in Africa facing issues repaying this debt. So the advice of the IMF is in this context to reduce future expenditure, fiscal consolidation, and to reduce this debt. In the specific case of Rwanda, we've been having discussions with the IMF. Our situation is different in terms of the composition of our debt, which is highly concessional, which means that we have less pressure in terms of debt service, repayment of this debt. But of course, the advice of the IMF is also to have fiscal consolidation to achieve a certain objective of debt to GDP. So I think it's in that context that the MD was talking in Ethiopia.
We have 9 minutes to go, Governor. I think we can take more. With your permission, we can.
Yeah, okay, 4.
Okay, thank you. Alice?
And if you keep it to maximum 2 each.
Thank you so much. Thank you. My name is Alice Kajina from the New Times. We've had DRC as Rwanda's leading export destination for many years. So I'd like to know if the geopolitical tension has had any impact on this status so far. And my second question is in regards to the Trump administration decision to cut funding to key programs and also freeze some aid for different countries, including Rwanda. Was this decision factored in within the MPC decision, and do you see this impact on Rwanda, and do we have any interventions to cushion this? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Impact of DRC, nothing yet. It was a short period of time that the borders were closed, so borders have been opened as you followed, and we see trade resuming as normal. So for now, we haven't seen any big impact. And as I said earlier, our projections, we don't expect any big impact based on the efforts that are going on. So depending on the developments going forward, we keep on monitoring and revising our projection, taking decisions based on what happens. But for now, we don't see any problem yet. And for Trump's decision, mainly on USID, so far, the quick analysis we did during this MPC round, we don't see any big impact on us. There are programs mainly for Rwanda was in health, and so we fiscal side is doing the analysis to see what that means, but on the monetary policy side, nothing big as yet. Most of these things are imports from the US and directed to the beneficiaries. So, but so far, the quick analysis we did, no impact on the monetary policy side. Finance is doing analysis on the fiscal side, and I think from the Trump side, as you said, I think they are giving a window to the healthy financing, so maybe the impact at the end of the day might not be that big.
Katie Press.
Murakoze Gavana, nitwa Theoneste Zigama, nkorera Imvaho Nshya, nagira ngo mbabaze ku bibazo bijyanye n'ubucuruzi bwo kuri internet. Mu bisi ishize hari ibyo mwagize uruhare bwo kugira ngo mwahagarike za STT, abantu benshi barazizi, ariko muri ino minsi hari naho ujya ubona ku mbuga nkoranyambaga abantu bamamaza ibisa nkabyo. Sinzi niba nka Beneri hari amakuru mufite kuri ibi bintu, niba hari ibindi byadutse ubwo nabyo mwanduha amakuru, cyangwa se nyuma yo guhagarika STT byagize ubuhe musaruro ku baturage. Ikindi kibazo nabaza ni kijyanye n'uburyo abantu bajya gusaba inguzanyo, ugasanga umuntu agiye gusaba inguzanyo muri banki, ariko asanze muri banki baramushyize muri CRB kandi mu by'ukuri nta nguzanyo yafashe. Sinzi ikibazo kiba cyabayemo, kuko hari abo twagiye tuganirira batandukanye, umuntu akaba afite akorera muri banki, aho twaganiriye ukora n'umuganga ku bitaro bya Kiziguro, akoresha muganga Sako, ariko aza kwisanga bamubwira bati afite inguzanyo ku Kimisagara, akibaza ukuntu rero yahuye n'iyo Sako. Mu by'ukuri ugasanga ni amakuru agiye atandukanye, ariko ugasanga umuntu bamwanditse inguzanyo adafite. Sinzi iki kibazo niba Beneri ikiziho amakuru n'uburyo cyakemuka. Murakoze cyane.
Yeah, thank you. Gerard, subiza ibibazo byombi.
Murakoze Gavana, nibyo koko mu minsi ishize twakoze ubukangurambaga kugira ngo abantu birinde ibigo bigenda biza mu Rwanda bigashaka kwambura abaturage. Bimwe akenshi byitwaza ikoranabuhanga rya cryptocurrency, ariko ngira ngo nkuko Beneri yagiye bisobanura, ukorana na cryptocurrency abikora yirengera igihombo kizamo kubera yuko nta mategeko harabigenga mu Rwanda. Ubwo rero ubukangurambaga tubukoze, ngira ngo byari byinshi. Hari icyo cya STT, hari TAT, hari n'ibindi bigiye bitandukanye. Ubukangurambaga bukoze, abaturage barabyumvishe, babivamo, ariko abenshi bamwe babihombeyemo. Ubwo ngira ngo hari icyo bita billionaire traders, ngira ngo mwarakibonye, ba nyiracyo barafunzwe, abaturage baba bahombeyemo arenga miliyari 10. So n'ibindi bitandukanye. So rero icyo Beneri gumya kubwira abaturage, hari n'icyo waruvuzeho, ngira ngo hari ibyo ubu ngubu tumaze iminsi tubona bigera nko muri 4. Hari icyitwa Dere Equipment, cyiyitirira ikigo cyo muri Amerika, kikavuga yuko gitanga imashini z'ubuhinzi, ariko mu by'ukuri nicyo kwambura abaturage. Ntabwo gikorana n'icyo kigo cyo muri Amerika. So ngira ngo amatangazo yagiye atambuka. Hari icyo twita PI network, so nacyo gikora nka cryptocurrency, nacyo ntabwo cyemewe. Hanyuma hari icyo twita Dynance, nacyo gisa nkaho gitanga imiti, ariko iyo ubirebye gikora nka pyramid scheme. Hari icyo twita Flex Fund. So ibyo byose mu by'ukuri nibiza kwambura abaturage, ariko ngira ngo turimo gukorana na RIB ishinzwe ubugenzacyaha kugira ngo ibikurikirane ba nyirabyo babiryozwe. Icya kabiri muvuze kijyanye na CRB, ngira ngo tumaze iminsi tubikoramo, dukora ubukangurambaga, kubera yuko hari icyo uvuze yuko umuntu ashobora gushyirwa muri CRB cyangwa se mu kigo gishinzwe gukusanya amakuru ku nguzanyo adafite inguzanyo. Twagiye tubona ibyo bibazo koko, ariko bigaterwa nuko hari uburyo indangamuntu ikigo cy'imari gishobora kuyishyiramo nabi, bigatuma hajyamo umuntu utari we, ariko aho bibonetse bihita bikosorwa. ku buryo ikigo cy'imari iyo gifatanyije na icyo twita TransUnion gishinzwe gukusanya amakuru ku nguzanyo bahita bakorana ibibazo bakabikosora ku gihe. Ngira ngo twanatangiye ubukangurambaga, hari ubwo twakoreye i Kigali, ubushize twabukoreye i Musanze, mu kwezi kwa gatatu turateganya no kubukorera mu karere ka Huye, kugira ngo abantu bamenye yuko umuntu afashe inguzanyo ashyirwa muri CRB, ariko n'abahuye n'ibibazo bashobore gufashwa kugira ngo bikemuke ku gihe. Murakoze.
USSD code abantu bakoresha kumenya amakuru yabo muri CRB ni nawe byaba byiza abantu bakomeje bayitangaza, kuko byaba byiza umuntu akomeje areba niba nta kibazo afite muri CRB. Hari ufite code hano? Yes, Fred.
Murakoze Gavana, ngira ngo nk'uko Jean bivuze ubukangurambaga tumaze iminsi dukora harimo no kumenyesha abaturarwanda iyi menyesha program ya CRB ya TransUnion. USSD code ikoreshwa kugira ngo abantu barebe uko bahagaze, ni nacyo tugumya gukangurira abaturage no kukanda akanyenyeri 707 urwego, hanyuma ugakurikiza amabwiriza ariho ukareba uko uhagaze mu bijyanye n'imyenda n'inguzanyo. Murakoze.
Ikindi ujya kujya muri CRB ntabwo ari imyenda gusa, watanze sheke itazigamiwe tujya muri CRB nabwo hari amabwiriza n'amategeko agenda ukuvamo, ariko ibyo byose iyo unyuze muri iyo nzira uhita umenya ko nta kibazo ufite cyangwa se niba n'igihari ukagikemura. Yes, the last two.
Thank you, Governor. My name is Saul Butera, Managing Editor for the Kigali Financial Journal. Sir, to what extent do you see the global supply chain disruptions affecting inflation in Rwanda? And if yes, how are you planning to address this? Maybe also, how are you managing the exchange rate pressures, and what's the outlook for this year? Thank you. Maybe a last one. Is John Deere also a pyramid scheme? Thank you.
On supply chain disruptions, I think I had indicated in the presentation and the global developments on inflation that these issues had eased. So we had that problem way back after COVID and with the disruptions in the Red Sea, but for now we don't see any problem with the supply chain disruption. That's why you see commodity prices have been going down, global inflation is going down. So unless there's anything new coming up, but for now there's been a lot of improvement on global supply chain. The other question was what? Exchange rate. Exchange rate? Thierry can answer that.
Thank you. On the exchange rate, as you saw, the year 2024 we had 9.4%, which is half the level we had the year before in 2023, where we had the most pressure with 18% depreciation. So that is a sign that exchange rate pressures are normalizing, and this year we expect it to be a bit less. And as the governor said, in the medium term, we expect it to go back to the normal depreciation that we see historical, which is around 5% per year.
So ikigo warubaje ngo ni ikihe?
John Deere.
Ariko yagisobanuye no he did wenda ijambo ntiryumvikanye neza, ariko yagisobanuye yishyize mu bigo bifite ibibazo nabyo birimo bikurikirana. Yes.
The last one is Fiona.
Yes.
Thank you. Good morning, Governor. My question is around the recent adjustments that were made by the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning, as well as also going back to the RSSB contributions. How likely are they to impact inflation, consumer spending, as well as the business costs, especially since some consumers feel like it's coming at a time when the salary is also not increasing? How are we seeing this playing out?
I think on the first one on taxes, I had touched that. I had indicated that based on the analysis we did before the taxes were announced, we didn't see any big impact on inflation in general. There might be one commodity or the other, but when you look at the global picture, the impact on the basket, it won't be bad. That would require us to take different actions as a monetary authority. So we see that to be contained within our band. And depending on the salaries, that's beyond our control. I think the employers of different, from different categories are taking decisions to manage the impact on their staff, so that we don't have any comment on that. Okay.
Thank you, Governor. This marks the end of the press conference, and maybe an announcement to make is the documentation used for this press conference can be found on our website and on our social media platforms. Thank you.